Welcome to KSOK Uncensored. Tonight we have a special guest. We have Brad Benton, who is running for Washington House of Representatives, District 18, Position 2. Come on in, Brad. Yeah. Live TV. Here we are. How's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
That was the icebreaker. It was 100% intentional. So appreciate you hanging
Perfect.
in
No,
there.
I really appreciate you having me.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. Well, I think it's really exciting. So you are running for office for the first time, and I know you're running on a slogan. Okay, what is it? Youthful energy with conservative
Youthful
value.
energy with traditional conservative values, yes. Something that you don't find this day and age.
Seriously, you are a unicorn, and I think that is amazing. And thank you for selflessly running. I mean, people don't realize what a commitment it is on so many levels. And so I think that's fantastic. Talk to us about what inspired you or pushed you to run.
So basically, I've grown up my entire life around, local state politics. My dad was a state legislator for over 20 years growing up. And I've always known that it's something that I wanted to get into because I've always wanted to help people, serve people. And to me, the ultimate form of service is politics at whatever level that is, because you can inflict so much good on people's lives with good governance, right? And so it's something I've always known that I wanted to do. I didn't know when. And then this year, it all kind of came together. I had an opportunity where there were two open seats in the 18th district where I live for rep, and nobody else really in the field at the time that I thought, nobody's really any more qualified or less qualified than I am. I've been around it my entire life. I spent a few years after college working in the white collar world as an accountant. I've spent the last year and a half working in the blue collar field, manual labor, working as a technician for a small business. And so with that unique kind of mix of blue and white collar experience, college education, young with traditional conservative values, I just felt that it was the perfect time for me and my life experience to come together, finally throw my hat in the ring, and get involved in the way I've always envisioned myself involved in the process.
That is fantastic. What's it like growing up as the son of a politician?
It's interesting. When you say senator, a lot of people assume that your dad works in D.C., and it's not always the case. A lot of people don't understand, civics and the different levels. So I'd have to explain that my dad's a state senator, which is not to say that that's not an extremely important job, a job that, he had to sacrifice a ton for, whether that's time with the family or whether that's time away from his business. Because as you know, in Washington State, it's a part-time citizen legislature, so we're only in session 3 or 4 months out of the year, which means that as somebody who is willing to serve their fellow citizens, you have to take time away from your day job, the job that, pays the bills the
Right.
other, 9 months of the year in order to go up to Olympia and try and fight for what's right. So it was great to learn from my father how to do it with integrity, how to have that balance of, work-life balance, things like that. And it was just a privilege to learn state politics firsthand, grow up around it, be around, I practically grew up in the Washington State Capitol, and, it lit a fire in me, really. I'm not sure why none of my other siblings, I have 3 siblings, ever really have had a ton of interest in it. But ever since I was a kid, I always told people I was going to be the president one day. And so maybe this is one small
Love
step.
that. You know what's funny? I was going to ask you because I was going to say you're one of four. Why do you think that nobody else is interested? So it's funny that you went
You
there.
know,
But,
yeah,
yeah.
I have no idea. I'm 3 of 4. The oldest is a sister, then an older brother, and then a younger brother. And for some reason, the bug hit me. I I think it's because I've always had a passion, like I said, to serve people. And growing up, I saw my dad serving people in one of the most effective ways possible. Like I said before, good governance is a way that you can really help people. On the other hand, it can be a huge detriment to people. I mean, look at the last 2 years with, who's in the White House, what party controls Congress. You can see how detrimental bad governance can be. In Washington state over the past couple of years at the state level, you can see how much damage can be done when people with the wrong motives, wrong agendas, wrong ideologies are the ones who have the car keys.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, Washington State has been incredibly mismanaged, and government overreach is so apparent. Talk to us about your stance on taxes, because I really feel that Washington State has really mismanaged that for quite some time, decades, if not longer.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the legislature wants to tax people out of house and home. Absolutely just ridiculous. I don't know what stance my opponents have, but I know that I can give you a personal guarantee that I will never vote for a tax increase under any circumstances. And that's because the government already takes too much of our hard-earned money. You and I, if we in any given month went over budget and decided, hey, we don't have the money for it, but we want to buy a boat, we can't go to our boss and say, hey, I need you to give me more money because I decided to buy a boat. No. So government, we're held accountable as private citizens, and government needs to be held accountable to us. And so that's what I want to do. I want to go to Olympia and be somebody who is sticking up for the taxpayer. At the end of the day, all that money is our money that's being used.
Right.
So it's treated like a never-ending slush fund that can just be spent, frivolously on whatever, however much. No, that's money that you and I earn. That's money that some kid earned working at fast food. It's money that I earned, when I was in public accounting or doing what I'm doing now. It's money that a police officer earned keeping the streets safe. And it's not right that the government is not held accountable for our tax
Right.
dollars. And so my big thing
Exactly.
is accountability. I want to
Yeah.
go to Olympia and hold their feet to the fire.
And there is an overall lack of accountability within government, just nationwide. And obviously Washington State is at the top of that. But it's funny, accountability is throughout the Bible. You'll find the importance of accountability. It's wild. You'll find it all throughout Scripture because it's incredibly important. Just humans need to be held accountable. There has to be accountability. Otherwise, it is completely detrimental, and that's what we've been seeing. And you know what happens if I go out of budget, especially way out of budget? I get the wrath of my husband. So I have the
Mm-hmm.
accountability here in my household, and believe me, it's not fun. I'm the spender of the two of us. Now I'm just saying that it's just a little side funny, but it's true though. Like people have to have some accountability to someone, right? And so the fact that these government employees have just been completely mismanaging money and printing it off this magical, money tree, it's got to stop. So I love that you're running on accountability because that's 100% overdue and needed.
Yeah, that's my biggest issue is government accountability. Fighting for no more new taxes, that's for sure. But I plan on, if I get sent to Olympia every time they roll a budget out in front of me that they want me to vote on, I'm going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. And I'm going to see where we're spending people's hard-earned tax dollars and if we really need to be spending it the way that we are. At the end of the day, if we can cut spending, theoretically, we should be able to also cut taxes. And so my ultimate goal, and it may be, a way out there dream, would be to actually cut taxes one day if we can. But it starts with saying no more tax increases and then finding places in the budget where we can trim the fat.
Right. Amen to that. On that, let's pivot over to this freeway, the tolling system. What is it? I have it written down here. We've got the I-5 river crossing. Where do you stand on this and the potential of paying toll fees?
So about a decade ago, there were big talks about replacing the I-5 bridge. It is an old bridge. I believe it was built in about 1917. So they were thinking from an infrastructure standpoint, it would need to be replaced. And they used that, and when I say they, I mean state legislatures on both the Oregon and the Washington side of the river. They use that as a caveat to then add on light rail and say, okay, if we're going to do this bridge, we're going to bring light rail into Vancouver. And my standpoint is under no circumstances can that be done. So that was 10 years ago. That was finally killed. I'm proud to say that, my dad was part of that movement. Well, now here we are, and this beast rears its ugly head again. And don't get me wrong, I am not opposed to a new bridge. When it's time for a new bridge and all of the engineers come together and say, listen, this isn't safe from an infrastructure standpoint, we need a new bridge. Let's do it, but let's do it the right way. Let's do a bridge that has expanded lanes, not only on the bridge, but then has infrastructure on both sides that can handle the expansion of the lane. So we're not still creating a bottleneck. I drove over that bridge almost every day for 2 years. The public accounting firm I worked for was in Portland. And so, living in Vancouver, I drove over it. I understand how bad the traffic is. Because it's so bad, and because parking in Portland's so bad, I was forced to take the light rail. So I would do a park and ride, get on the light rail, and I've seen firsthand how dangerous light rail is, how ineffective it is. It is almost always, no, I think I can safely say 100% of the time runs behind schedule. It seems like, you have to have a pass, so to speak. Well, the homeless obviously don't care. So light rail would be a conduit of bringing Portland's homeless issue, which, by the way, has gotten so much worse in Portland and the state of Oregon over the last 2 years, thanks to people like Kate Brown and Ted Wheeler and, that whole regime. But anyhow, we can't have
into your neighborhoods, unfortunately.
Exactly. It's already spilling into Vancouver. So to have a bridge option that installs light rail and is basically a free pass that says, come over to our side of the river, let's see if the grass is any greener over here to those homeless populations, is not the answer. And by no means am I trying to be derogatory toward the homeless. That's a whole nother issue that we need to work on as a community at the city, county, and state levels. But the answer is not to have a free ride from Portland into Vancouver and vice versa for those people. So my number one issue with the Columbia River crossing is making sure to not support any option that brings light rail into Vancouver. The other thing is, then they want to talk about building another bridge, whether it's rebuilding the I-5 bridge or adding a third bridge, which I'm hugely in favor of a third bridge. I think just based on the population growth in Vancouver, East Vancouver, Camas, I think third bridge would be a great option. But then they want to add tolls, and they want to pay for this bridge partially in tolls. Residents of Washington State already, I believe in 2020, paid $325 million of state income tax to the state of Oregon. So not only do they want to tax hard-earning Washingtonians for trying to make a living and working in Oregon, but now you're going to add a toll of who knows how much just for the ability to get into the state to then work. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
It disproportionately punishes residents of Southwest Washington just for trying to create a living for their families.
Right, right. No, it absolutely does. And for those watching that don't know, so in Washington state, there is not income tax, but if you work over the bridge in Oregon, you pay the income tax. Oregon doesn't have sales tax, Washington does. So you're really being double hit if that's what's happening. Which again, Portland has a lot more, Oregon has a lot more jobs than Vancouver, but despite the growth. But yeah, so that's what they're dealing with. And now you want to charge them to cross the bridge where they're already being double taxed. So yeah, that's a problem. Brad, let's talk
Exactly.
about, well, I want to talk about the homeless next, but I do want to just bring up with the light rail. I live in the Clackamas area, and they expanded the max out to Clackamas. And we knew this was like what, maybe within the last 5, 6 years, but we knew crime was going to increase then. Unfortunately, I just wasn't as involved with what's happening, politics, and just I wasn't as involved in the community at that time. But we knew once it went in that we were going to see crime, and boy have we. We don't even go to the movie theater that's over there, which is right off the max line. The mall has turned into really like a cesspool. Businesses are leaving. There have been shootings in the mall parking lots. There's been a mall shooting. So a once relatively quiet and safe area, and I highly believe that it is because of that light rail that is why crime has increased. And I completely steer clear, and I don't spend my money over there. So I see that as a huge issue if it went into Vancouver, and an issue you don't want. You guys have enough that you're dealing with. So about homelessness, let's dive into your stance on some actions and accountabilities that you would put in place around homelessness.
Mm-hmm. Before we move on entirely, just a quick story of my own to
Yeah.
show people that really, anybody who rides the Max has had an experience like this, I'm sure. I was on it one morning on the way, I worked, I don't even remember. It was the Pioneer Courthouse Square. We stop at the Rose Quarter, and we're stopped and waiting. And, I'm relying on this to get me to work somewhat on time, and we're sitting and waiting. Finally, the conductor comes on. Sorry for the delay, folks. We had somebody shooting up in one of the cars, and there's blood everywhere. We have to clean it up before we get going. Is that,
Uh,
we have enough issues in Southwest Washington with homelessness. Is that another issue we want to bring in with light rail? Do we want to add the addition of just another space where it's just another unsafe space and another conduit
right,
to bring people over?
right, right.
So then moving on from that, obviously we have a problem. We need to help these people. So the answer is not just to give them a train ticket to move from side to side. I think the number one answer is dealing with mental health. Huge majority of people who are living on the street are on the street because of mental health issues, diagnosed or undiagnosed. The other big one is drug abuse. The answer as far as what to do for those, it's difficult to say. I know one step we can take is just as a society is destigmatizing, mental health in general, understanding that it is something that's very real and that people need help. I'm a huge advocate for counseling, therapy of any kind that people can get, but we need to make sure that people have access to that. And the first step is just saying, hey, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to need to talk to someone. I support that. I support you, and let's get you the help that you need. So there's number one is that mental health issue. Number two, uh, like I said before, drug abuse is a huge problem that leads to homelessness. Um, And I think that, frankly, the best way to deal with that is going to be by supporting our law enforcement communities, which, as we've seen over the last couple of years, there's been a huge uh, shying away from saying I back the blue or I support my law enforcement communities. Nobody's perfect, but they're there for a reason, and they're out there putting their lives on the line every day for our safety and protection. Um, so I think just acting towards law enforcement with a positive mindset rather than saying they're all bad guys. We need to
Right,
say,
right.
no, these are people that are in it for the right reasons. And just like anything else, there's, I hate to say the cliche, a couple bad apples, but it's true no matter where you
Yeah,
go. I mean,
it's
look at Congress. They're not all terrible people, but there's definitely some bad apples.
Oh, right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people don't want us to judge a community by a few people that have done illegal things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, why would we judge a community of police? Yeah, yeah, it makes complete sense. So no, I think that, I mean, you're spot on. I know Vancouver PD and Clark County PD, or Clark County Sheriff's Office, they're both dealing with an exodus and then a difficulty in getting people to come and work and be police officers. And so there's a hiring need, and then we have people leaving at the same time because it's so unattractive right now. So, and then that combined with just really wimpy lawmakers in the state of Washington, I mean, allowing all sorts of illegal activity to go without prosecution and just really no deterrent. That's the perfect storm that we're seeing here. And you're not at the point of Portland, not Portland Junior yet. That's why we need people like you to come in and clean it up before it gets to that point. Because then at that point, you're looking at a decade before you can turn it around. But I appreciate that,
Exactly.
Brad.
And we saw over the last few years, specifically in 2020 and 2021 during legislative sessions in Washington state, where there was legislation that, as fallout from the BLM and the riots, we had legislation that limited police ability to do certain things, certain techniques of restraint, certain weapons that they could use. And luckily, in this last legislative session, they passed some changes that addressed a few of those issues. But the larger problem is, in the wake of this BLM, the legislature just said, okay, well, we're just going to completely put law enforcement in this box because they're all doing it wrong. So we're going to limit their ability to do their job. And that's not the answer. We need to empower law enforcement to be able to do their job, do it effectively. We need to put people in positions of leadership and power within departments that are setting the tone from the top, that are saying,
Yes.
this is how we act as a department. This is what happens if you act not in accordance and you're doing things that are detrimental to not only the department and the safety of people, but the public image of law
Right.
enforcement. You can see in issues where law enforcement officials have basically been caught up in, I don't know about wrongdoing, but it's
Yeah.
these people have had past transgressions, I'll say. Is
Right.
if there's ever, an officer that's caught up in it like that, usually there were some signs beforehand that maybe they, on a personal level, weren't fit for the job. That's not to say
Right.
that all cops are that way. That's just to say, just like in any facet of life, some people are ill equipped to do certain things.
Exactly. Yep. No, that's a great point that you bring up. So I appreciate that very much. I know we're coming up on time, and this is really important to talk about. As a mama bear who pulled her kids out of school recently and started homeschooling for the first time, and believe me, that was not my calling. It's becoming my calling. But someone who's very passionate about ensuring that that my kids don't get indoctrinated in school. Really, it's government school. it's an indoctrination camp. And I know that you have strong feelings on what you would like to do as far as education is concerned, and really how to give the parents that freedom and that decision making back.
Well, first off, I'll say good for you. It's definitely a noble undertaking to say that you're going to pull the kids out and do it yourself. That's no easy task.
No, it's not.
But but that shouldn't be a position that we're putting parents in. Our tax dollars pay for public education. It's a service. It's a service that's to be provided to our community, funded by taxpayer dollars, so that mom and dad can go out and they can provide for the family and know that their children are being given an education that will prepare them for life, for the next level of education, whether that's, 2-year college, 4-year college, vocational school, whatever that is. And lately there have been some serious doubts cast upon the public education system, not just in our state, but countrywide. I'm sure you've seen on social media or the news the things that they're trying to teach children. One of them would be, CR critically. I don't support any curriculum in a school that teaches children that they are, based on the color of their skin, they have less rights than anybody else, or are at a disadvantage or an advantage because of it. That's not something that we should be talking about to school-age children, and it's just not true. It's a country based on freedom and equality for all and equal opportunity. So to be teaching this fabricated idea that certain groups of people are at a disadvantage from the go, that's hugely detrimental to our society as a whole, and especially to those kids. And then the other issue of bringing sexuality into the classroom, teaching any form of sex education to a kid before 5th grade is absolutely deplorable. And frankly, in my opinion, it should entirely be taught in the home. I don't think that our public education system should be doing any educating as it relates to sex, sexuality, gender ideology, anything like that. That is for an individual person to deal with, to basically to experience and understand as they develop, with their family, their community. It's not something for Mr. Jenkins, the 4th grade teacher, to be telling the kids about.
No, it sure isn't. And sexuality has become a fad in schools. Like, oh, how can I be like to not be heterosexual? Can be anything but heterosexual. And that's totally cool, right? And so we're seeing that, and we're seeing it online too, where it's a fad to be some other. I mean, gosh, have you seen how many different sexualities there are out there and how many pronouns? And it's become like the Converse in the 80s. You know what I mean? It's like crazy. Like everyone has a starter jacket. You got to get one. Oh, you need the high top Converse. You need to be pansexual. You know what I mean? So it's like one of these things, and it's just because they're being groomed by the government, really. And to your point that you made when you started talking about education, it really resonated with me. We as parents have been backed into a corner. Like, for instance, today is the last day of school for North Clackamas, where my kids went to school. And I happened to be at the store earlier and saw one of the gals that worked in one of the secretaries, and she was saying, oh, I have your daughter in our slideshow. And, and it's sad because she would be graduating from that school in 5th grade. She's in the slideshow. And it makes me sad that she's missing out on all of these opportunities that really we shouldn't have had to be forced into the corner, backed into the corner to homeschool our kids. But with what they're teaching, what you've talked about, that's where we're at right now. So we really need people like you to fight back and say enough's enough. Let's just stick to what we should be focused on, which is just an education. It's not a sexuality course, or I just can't even. I can't even with them.
Math, science, history, English, that's what they should be learning.
Right. You'd think it makes sense, but what's up is down, what's down is up. All right, Brad. Well, I appreciate you very much. Where can people find you?
So people can find me on my website, benton4rep.com. That's my last name, bentonforrep.com. You can shoot me an email at brad@bentonforrep.com. Find all my info there. And I'd love it if anyone who saw this reached out, if they want to know more, I'd be happy to have a dialogue.
Right. Exciting. All right. Yeah. Get involved if you can, if you're local. If not, reach out. And I just really appreciate what you're doing for the community. I appreciate you taking time to come on my podcast. And best of luck to you.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Anytime. All right. You take care. Talk to you soon, Brad. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. All right, so as you may have noticed last week, this did not air on YouTube. My YouTube channel was blocked for a week, so that's just what happens when you're an open conservative. So you can find this show and RAM TV or Right America Media, and I have my list here that I'm gonna read off. You can find us on Rumble, Facebook, Clout Hub, Twitter, ramtv.live, our website, Getter, and occasionally on YouTube if I'm not banned. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next Thursday on KSOK Uncensored.